One.
Hello, everybody. I call the meeting to order. First we will do a roll call. Dylan, is that something you do?
Yep.
Thank you.
Bernal. Elliot Pahinui.
Here.
Melendres. Oshiro. Here. Smith.
Here.
Verre.
Here.
Yamanaka. Here. All right, we have quorum, Chair.
Thank you very much. First up on the agenda, we have public concerns for items not on the agenda. Are there any public concerns anyone wishes to offer? Hearing none, we'll move on to our approval of committee minutes. Excuse me. I don't know if I actually.
Did you
We have those distributed?
Yes, in the mail out just last week.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
Yeah.
I think I get that.
So they are public.
Did anybody have, any committee members wish to offer any amendments? Hearing none, they will be, not approved, but they will be adopted as distributed. Thank you very much. So next up on our agenda is our new business. As we discussed, and we didn't actually kind of vote on it, but we did, I think, get an endorsement by acclamation of the committee that if at any point, if the NCO wanted to come and offer suggestions or proposal for a review and amendment of the complaint process, that the committee would stop its normal course of our review of the overall plan, and we would focus on the review of the complaint process. Well, in the time between our November meeting and planning for this meeting, that did in fact happen, and that's why this is on the agenda, that we will take up the complaint process. And so I hope there's no objections. So with that said, we'll start with our review, and Dylan is actually going to lead it because it is, we did ask for a proposal from the NCO, and he will go. So take it away, Dylan.
Do you have something to pull up?
Yeah, 1 second.
And so this is something that, we just pretty much have, we've been working on. We know that no one's seen it yet, so this is just being distributed now. We don't expect you to necessarily vote on this tonight or anything, but it's just something that we wanted to show as sort of and of course this is for your consideration and how and if you would like to amend any part of it at a future date. But the point was, it was just something where if we could help out with looking at some of the pain points and then coming up with something that the commission could consider, and then, amend as needed. But the idea was to just get a general direction of where does the complaint process want to go, comparing how it is now and ultimately something that may be more efficient, time smart, and while still maintaining a fairness to all parties, still feeling that things are being heard, but just sped up and a little less, I guess, formal, it might be the word. Not so much of like a hearing, but more of a grievance process, I would say. So with that said, we have up here on the screen, and of course, all the language would have to still be reviewed and everything too. We would have court counsel do that. So, keep that in mind. But the general idea was making this more of a team issue. And so getting away from singling out individual board members or oftentimes, I guess, we see the same types of complaints that are like order and decorum all the time. I think there needs to be a little bit
Dylan,
more
I'm so sorry, Dylan. I'm going to interrupt you right there. Would it be possible to have somebody in your office email this to, since it's just me, Tom, and Kevin, email this to us so it's a little easier for us to follow along? For example, if I want to make notes, I can't make notes.
Yes, Dylan Buck here. I did just upload it to the Google Drive. The link
Okay,
is
great,
available.
thank you.
But I do believe that that is also a PDF document. I don't think I have a Word doc with me right now.
No, but I still use pen and paper.
Okay. Yeah, and the
Thank
sense of it was that this was just for introduction and there would be no action taken.
Yeah.
Before you continue, so I know how you proceed. So do we presume that what's currently in the plan is deleted and you're just replacing with what you have here? So we can't tell what you're actually taking out and what you're adding perhaps. But I can see just reading the first paragraph, some things that significantly taken out of the current language. So,
It's kind of a combination.
well, it's either one or the other. I mean,
Well,
if you're going to delete everything here, then we just focus on this. But if you're going to modify language from what's currently in the plan, we can't tell from this document. So I just wanted to understand whether we should look at both of these or just look at this, because at some point we're talking about revisions to the plan. That means that we're changing what's current.
Yeah, we have a
But this-
strike, yeah,
this-
we have
this-
a strikeout version.
You do?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what would be helpful. I mean, I can't tell reading this what you took out.
Yeah,
Unless
no.
you're really going,
Yeah, and I think some,
word for word.
yeah, and I think some of it's nitty gritty, but yeah, we do have a strikeout version that we have as well.
Meaning a
that we
round
can
clear
share.
format of this.
Yeah, that's what it's called.
That's what's, yeah, and he had it.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I think at this point, it's just kind of like, right now, you're just talking about general philosophies.
Yeah, right now it's
and
just-
then maybe
yeah.
we can get into specifics.
Yeah, right now it's just general philosophy, and if I wanna say, and I know, like you said, that there are changes which we'll be able to compare later, but the general philosophy was, as it stands right now, just to give a general idea, if the system works absolutely perfectly, it's someone who wants to file a complaint can wait 45 days after an incident happens at a meeting. So, meeting takes place, a complainant has 45 days, so a month and a half. And let's say they file on the 45th day. Then the executive secretary has up to 10 days to review the complaint and see if it's, I guess, not frivolous as the language of the plan. Assuming it's not, it gets forwarded on to the respondent, who has a further 45 days to respond to the complaint. Then it goes to the commission, which may be, say, another half a month before it gets to the commission, just based on the timeline of when the next commission meeting is. And so it could be half a month to a month. And then after, maybe there's an adjudicatory function, maybe the following month is when the complaint's actually heard. So we're talking 4 or 5 plus month process for a single complaint. And it's a lot of paperwork, it's a lot of scheduling, it's functionally a hearing for something that we think often can be resolved at the board level. And if not at the board level, the board can come together, make some sort of recommendation or resolution to the commission as kind of a checks and balance. And then the commission can take whatever was ultimately decided by the board and accept it, dismiss the complaint, or even, listen to more evidence and modify it. And that's kind of the direction, is having it settled at the board level and then elevated to the commission for the ultimate setting.
broadly, you also, one big thing I see that you've taken out was complaints can be filed against only a board or a board committee.
Yeah.
So you eliminated board member. So that's a big one, because we have a lot of complaints
Yeah, I think,
for the board members. However, under sanctions, I didn't quite see that where you can impose sanctions on a board or a current
Yes.
board member. So how does that work?
so.
They're not part of the
Yeah.
complaint process.
So in that case, the way that we looked at it was oftentimes a single person is, and this is a mechanic for several reasons. Number one, oftentimes a board member is singled out who maybe isn't even necessarily the affected party, but someone wants to file a complaint against the board, they just file it against the single chair. We don't really think that's fair. Also, if a member of the public wants to file a complaint, like if we were to make these rules, these changes to the rules, then there is nothing in theory that couldn't stop, say, a board member from saying, well, I'm limited in how I can file complaints, but I can tell my neighbor who's not a board member to file complaints against individual people. That could happen too, so this is kind of a safeguard in that way. However, when it comes to the commission taking in this information, hearing both parties, maybe they do make that determination that yes, the complaint was filed against the whole board, but there may be a particular person that is seeming to be the issue with the board. So the complaint's filed against the whole board, but the commission having a little bit of latitude to maybe impose a sanction on a particular member who is making the complaint happen. That's
Well,
kind
I'm
of
saying the same thing, though, that if you have a board member that you will sanction, then they may be a member of the board, or they may be also a member of the committee, or one or the other. But you can still sanction the board member, but you cannot file a complaint against the board member, according to what you've got here.
Well, you're filing it against the whole board, which
Correct.
assumes that you're filing it against the
Right.
members.
So the
just
sanction
because-
should be on the board and the committee.
Well, just because you file against the whole board doesn't necessarily mean that the whole board will then be found liable. You may find that there's one or two people that are ultimately
So
issued.
if somebody felt that the chair of the committee, for example, violated this,
Mhm.
then could they file it against that chair?
Well, the way that we see it is that oftentimes everyone, it's like a team. Everyone carries equal weight. So if there's an incident that's occurring, maybe sometimes the board chair needs to take action, but they're hesitant or they're not sure, but the rest of the board just kind of sits there and lets it happen. And is there not some sort of bearance of responsibility on the rest of the board to support the chair and maybe even speak up themselves at times? So when an incident happens, it's not isolated to just the incident happening and it's the chair's fault if they didn't control the meeting. We want it to be more of like, this is the whole board that needs to step up and get behind the chair and, try and find a resolution of the issue.
Maybe, excuse me, maybe we find in here there's some very casual type of procedure. In other words, somebody comes to a commission meeting during public concerns, and they say, hey, my board, the chair won't put on my agenda items, won't let us vote it pursuant to the chair. And there's something in here that says, well, the commission can just order the chair to do X, Y, and Z. We don't need to, because if the chair comes back and says, well, they didn't really ask me, blah, 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 we just say, hey, pursuant to the plan, you're supposed to do this. And we just direct them. I mean, I suppose under the current plan, would you say that's appropriate? I mean, because certainly the executive secretary can do that.
I mean, we currently on a day-to-day operation basis, we kind of deal with those issues.
Okay, so,
I've told a number of chairs, put it on.
okay,
So
but I mean,
there's
that's an
a lot
example
of-
of
yeah.
a case.
there's a lot of things that come in that we deal with immediately or pretty
Okay.
immediate. And some of it is procedural stuff, and we just answer the question, but some of it, like putting it on agenda. The chairs all know, and if anybody complains about that, I just contact the chair and say, you're required by the plan to do these things.
Okay, so that
so-
really,
There's a lot of things that we just take care of. I think the challenge for us is when, at times, the complaint process, takes so much of our time. And it's not, in our view, it's like, you guys need to take care of this at the board level. And a lot of times, like Dylan said, it's something that happens, but the rest of the board stays silent when they should be supporting some kind of action, like, oh, no, you shouldn't do that, or you can't do that, or whatever it is. And I think it's our attempt to try and get the responsibility for your meeting back to the board. And say, if you have a problem and you got enough people filing complaints, then you got a problem at your board level right here. So you fix it. And you deal with it, and whatever you recommend, if the person files a complaint, it comes to the commission, or the commission gets to look at it. I've always been a believer that the board should handle as many things as possible. I don't like the father influence on everything, where they immediately come to the commission, immediately come to the NCO. But, anyway, sorry.
Chair,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I agree with Lloyd. I think where you see this more often is when you get a new chair I just saw it in one of the board meetings a couple of weeks ago, where one of the board members was totally out of line, really
Right.
badgering the official
Right,
and the new chair, and you could see the body language of the board. Nobody would say point of order, you know, and
Yeah.
stop it.
Stop.
But it has to do with training. But I appreciate you guys, when you do see that, to be able to counsel, because I think you're right. If we can handle everything at the lowest level for counseling, when you tell that chair, hey, you have to put this on the agenda because of this reason, they should listen. You should never have to go back a second time again. If you do, that flag should be raised to the commission.
no, you know, the times that they've asked, I've told them, you have to put it on, and these are the ways you can put it on. You got two choices. Just put it on, or put it on whether you should have it on the next agenda. But anyway, it needs to go on in some form. And once I've done that with the chair, they know already. So they know that the next time somebody asks, they gotta deal with it. But it's just our belief that our time, to me, I look at the boards and I say, you know, you've taken up our time to deal with something that you guys should deal with at the board level. And at some point, hopefully, everybody understands that they're there for the community, and taking up time to do a complaint about X, Y, Z is not beneficial to the community. And if you guys can handle it right then and there, then that's great. You know, but I am a firm believer that as much as possible, the board, I mean, y'all gotta learn to get along. So let's figure it out.
I have a second comment.
Please.
The other thing is, you know, I've only been on commission for a few months, but during this time, when I see it's taking up time, and I even heard it from Dylan, you know, when you got a board member that's issuing complaints, you gotta get something in writing to take control of whoever's making the complaint. That if you got multiple issues that happen during the board meeting, it's one complaint, and you address A, B, C, D, and that way, from administrative, it just took that weight off you guys. So you only got one document that you gotta respond to.
Right.
But if you can get that in writing in there, you know, to improve that, that would be great.
Well, other like minor ones, for example, were shortening up some of the process. So in previous language, it was 45 days, as noted, between, you know, when you can file a complaint and then when someone can respond. We've shortened that up to 10 days. We think typically if something really affected you that much in a meeting that, you know, you're willing to step forward and file a complaint, then it can be done in 10 calendar days. And that gives enough time for, if you were to file a complaint after a meeting, that it can actually go on the next meeting's agenda to be addressed by the full board.
One of the problems, you know, you're looking at it philosophically. One point I would raise is this, you know, for folks that go to board meetings, you know, most of the discussion is focused on, if you look at their agenda, it follows their agenda. You know, the reports from the first responders, police, fire, all the elected officials or the council members. And then, you know, they have presentations on issues that may be relevant to that particular board. The thing I would hate to see at board meetings is where they would have to dwell on complaints, for example, from anyone. Board members themselves complaining about another board member. And I hate to see them get mired in that kind of discussion at a public board meeting. I know the commission really doesn't like to deal with complaints, but, you know, when we get them, we deal with them, we focus on them and deal with them. But insofar as neighborhood board meetings, I just hate to see boards, you know, where you may get a lot of complaints, and we know which boards they are because we've seen the complaints of the commission. I hate to see a neighborhood board having to deal with that because they may get a lot of complaints, and all they end up doing is, instead of talking about what's going on in the community or community issues, they end up fighting between themselves over complaints that are filed by people. And certainly that will vary from board to board, but where you have people that will continue to file complaints like we've seen, you know, that to me is just gonna be a situation that I hate to see happen for any board.
And it goes back to the chair leadership. You take control of your board and bring those people together, sit them down and talk to them.
And
They gotta get along. Put them both in the room, shut the door.
Well, Larry, that's easier said than done. I mean, what you're
Kathleen's
seeing in
got a
a
big
couple of the
bath.
boards now, way back when it used to be Eva Beach, Akakila were like that. And It was ugly, and for me personally, I think when it comes down to a matter of personalities between a couple of board members, I agree. I think you bring the chair and the warring parties into a room and figure it out together and not waste board time at that. But some of this is just personal. It's just personal, and if you have great animus against somebody, I'm not sure how you deal with that. It's very difficult. It's very, very difficult. I think those are the kinds of things where the NCO has to get involved because it
Well,
could it got very ugly at Marca Kilo. Tom remembers. I mean, they had TROs against each other. It was horrible. It was not a good situation. So I don't know how a board can deal with that.
Well, so we did put in, and this is just working language, but we did put in a parameter that says when it comes to violations that you need to describe, it does not include legal claims or violations such as defamation, harassment, or discrimination. And like I said, that's just working language, but the idea is that if you have a personality conflict with someone, that's not something that should be risen to the level of filing a complaint, at least through the neighborhood board process, and you can seek maybe remedy elsewhere.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure I really like that limitation. I understand what you're getting at, because we can't obviously say someone defamed. It's not up to us to figure out harassment or even discrimination, I suppose, but we should still deal with the underlying circumstances. You know, we don't have to recognize it as defamation, but we can say that's not appropriate or something like that in all those cases. So I would just be a little concerned that people would not, I think that may push too many complaints, that may eliminate some really important complaints. That's just my initial thought. I don't know if anyone else.
I think a lot of times for us, it's, and I could be wrong, but a lot of times for us, it's a weighted analysis of what the harm is. And I understand a lot of people don't like change, but when you think of like the harm that's happening, if you can figure a way to kind of balance that out a little bit more, like people might not necessarily agree with this change, but the current alternative is what's happening right now. And we see a lot of times people filing complaints that are personality based, or we see arguing amongst board members that is based on neighbor to neighbor issues and stuff like that. That's not necessarily neighborhood board stuff. And without some sort of modification, that just continues to go on. We have records of filing cabinets of complaints over the years that are just thousands and thousands. And
Well,
it's based on the current system, the way that it is.
I mean, I would suggest that maybe we have some language that puts outside the purview of our complaint procedure, circumstances or things that happen outside of the board setting, be that the meeting itself or when people discuss board business or anything like that. In other words, like if they have a condo association issue, yeah, that's completely outside the purview of the complaint system, or should be. But I'm just concerned about this particular kind of eliminating some of these issues.
Yeah, and we haven't really found the language for it yet, but
Yeah.
but there is, well, I mean, in terms of the other issue, which is oftentimes people just citing order and decorum and then using that as a very wide latitude for a lot of different things.
Well, the problem that you have is, I mean, a lot of times people aren't lawyers. Most people aren't lawyers, so they don't know how to properly articulate. Like a lot of times when I see the complaints, it says you must talk about a section, and they just completely foobar that. But that's understandable, and I hate to, the problem is if you get really technical and say you did not specify, a relevant provision, then, you may eliminate, or people may be hesitant to actually file a something of valid, what should be reasonably considered a valid complaint. So, I don't know, I guess
guess
it would
we're-
just be going back to the drawing board.
We're trying to come up with something where you don't have to be a lawyer to be able to file a complaint.
Yeah,
And understand the complaint.
That's
Well,
why something broad gives you a lot of latitude in terms of what you do. It gives you a lot of discretion to say, yep, that's violation of order and decorum versus it's
I
not.
mean, well, if I could add one thing, and that is, so, I mean, I guess the philosophical perspective I would take it as is not to limit the ability or, to try to prevent people from filing complaints, but to maybe streamline the complaint review provisions, and allow them to be disposed of pretty easily, or much more easily than say, wait 45 days and that sort of thing. So with a lot of complaints, that's kind of the perspective that would make sense to me, because when you try to tell people, maybe go to your board or something like that, I would think, and maybe this hasn't happened in practice, is a lot of board members may have tried that and they're at the end of their rope and and that's why they file a complaint.
Well, the other thing too, I think that's important is I see the NCO as also as a clearinghouse. So when the complaints come in, maybe they haven't cited, like Patrick was saying, the right provision of the plan because they just don't know. I'm certainly not a lawyer, but I see the NCO is helping, saying, okay, if you want to file this plan, here are the things that apply, or sorry, nothing applies here, which usually is the case, nothing applies. But I think the NCO should at least be the clearinghouse. I understand streamlining the process, but again, as Patrick said, sometimes the NCO is the last. I know there have been boards where chairs have just stonewalled boards or a board member on an issue because they either don't like that board member or they don't care about the issue, and they've just decided unilaterally, I'm not going to deal with this. And this board member, for them, it's an important issue, and they feel stymied. So going to the NCO sometimes is the only place they can go to try and get some kind of resolution, whether it's advice. Like I call Lloyd up all the time for advice on how to handle an issue, and successfully almost every single time. But that's how I see the NCO as a clearinghouse, and I think they should be the same for complaints as well. However, that is articulated in this document. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the way I would envision it is we don't necessarily try to prevent a lot of complaints, but we just have a much better system of, say, initially evaluating and not raise every complaint to a level of, it has to have the respondent reply in 44 or 45 days. We can just, maybe with some of them, we say, this should be handled at the board level. In other words, we sort of triage it,
We can,
maybe at the executive
yeah, we
secretary,
do that.
and allow you to.
Yeah, we do that quite a bit because, for example, if a complaint has no, doesn't carry any weight, we want to say recommend dismissal, and if we looked at it, we quite often just agree, if, it doesn't really,
Well, I guess,
complaint and a hearing and all of that, we just can dismiss it pretty much out of hand.
yeah, and I mean, maybe, I don't know, it seems like now you still have to go through the complaint process, but maybe we can streamline that portion of it and say, if you have a recommendation that does not have merit, the commission can say, okay, we agree, and that's just the end of it. We don't have to do that. Go to the respondent or I don't know, something like
Because
that.
we do that already, right, Lloyd?
Do we?
Yeah,
I thought there was still.
we recommend dismissal, we agree.
Yeah,
We send a letter of
Right.
dismissal.
right. I mean, as long as if I have the option to recommend dismissal
Yeah.
and the commission has the option to say yes or no.
Right.
I think what, they want to streamline it, and that's probably our main thought process is how do we get this to work better, because we don't want to spend our time just running over complaints that come in. And the way the thing is set up right now, because they say when anything in a violation of the neighborhood plan, in the plan it says you have to do an oath of office. You swear to uphold all of those state of Hawaii, blah, 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 blah. So if you jaywalk, they can file a complaint against you. I mean, that's That's the problem. The second part is that we do comply with sunshine law. So all of a sudden we have complaints about sunshine law and they come in. And the thing is, when it comes to sunshine law, we are in a position where we're not attorneys, we're not there to interpret the law. We tell them go OIP and OIP says go back to us because you guys are use board. The commission is the one supposed to determine that. But you shouldn't be determining a violation of sunshine law too. In fact, the attorneys for the city will say, they already have attorneys for that over at OIP. So
Well, you guys
go-
have been good for that. You've been ahead of the process and already coordinated before it came to us.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that if there are a number of parts of the complaint process that we feel shouldn't even be part of the complaint process. I think if it's a violation of the plan, and again, if it's a violation of the plan, most of the time the complaints are, I was wronged. Something the board did or didn't do that I got affected, and I think that should be back in the board. You guys do it first, and you tell the commission.
I'm sorry, can you articulate that again? I'm not really following you. What is the circumstance you're talking about?
I mean, most of the complaints, or a lot of the complaints have to do with that they felt their rights were violated under the neighborhood plan.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, but a lot of it has to do with what happens in the meeting. And I think at that point, I think the board should take it up and they should decide, did we actually violate that person's right according to the plan? And they should be able to tell the commission, this is the complaint, this is what we discussed, this is what we heard at the board, and this is what we voted on, and this is what we agreed on. And I just want the board to, I would like the board more than anything else to take more responsibility for the actions at that level.
Well, this is an example of, rather than kind of just changing the overall process, so you can do an initial screening and you make a recommendation. So not only can you say, this is not without merit, but the other one is, this is better served by going back to the board. And you make that recommendation and the commission has the ability to say, yeah, that's fine. And or we agree, and it just happens outside not outside the complaint process, but that's dealt with.
That's one of the.
Yeah, like an option to
That
quickly
I
handle
think,
that.
I think in our first like sort of iteration of it, what we were thinking was actually removing the executive secretary from the process. So it would just be something that the board, and it's outlined in here without going into detail, but essentially the board would handle the situation, they would address it themselves and then bring that recommendation to the commission. But because one of a criticism that has been lodged at times and whatnot is, why is the executive secretary making recommendations to the commission on whether or not something should be dismissed?
Because it's in the plan.
Well, yes, but
No,
it's,
I mean,
but it's,
You
so
are
is everything
correct.
else in here.
Sorry.
Well, that's how you cut through a lot of the.
I mean, at the end of the day,
Complaint.
someone's got to make the call. And like you said, a lot of times it takes a long time. I mean, if you came in a few days before the meeting for the commission, they're gonna miss it because it's not sunshine law, we don't get on the agenda. So there's a lag, whereas the executive secretary can look at
So
it.
if you wanna change it to where any complaint comes to the executive secretary and the executive secretary makes that decision.
I would like to give more leeway. I mean, would that, I mean,
No, I-
seriously, would that?
Well, I
is-
think
would
the
that be
issue
problematic?
is that it's like when we come into these meetings, oftentimes like we talk kind of like, oh yeah, it's laissez-faire, sometimes we might do this, sometimes we might do that, but put that in writing, like how does that doesn't translate, because I feel like sometimes we just say, well, the commission, maybe this one they want to dismiss, maybe this one they want to move forward with. I get it, and that's how we feel too. Like, it would be nice if everyone could just do that, but everyone wants to drill down on the language on this, and I don't know a process where we could be so cavalier, when it seems like the way that this is going is everything needs to be in, what was that format?
Ransmeyer.
Yes.
Well,
So,
well, I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but I mean, I would think, giving the executive secretary more leeway earlier in the complaint process, you know, at the end of the day, we gotta rely, you know, we hope our executive secretary is, I don't mean you necessarily, but competent and dedicated and all that good stuff. So, you know, and we have to rely on the executive secretary. So, I mean, let me ask you this, just to be clear, I mean, is this something that you feel would be burdensome or something, or, you know, that you feel like it's not appropriate for the executive secretary to handle, or what are your thoughts there?
I'm assuming that there'd be a number of people would say it shouldn't be in the executive secretary's hands, it should be in the commission's hands. And maybe it's partly because being one person as opposed to a group. But I would love to have
Well,
more authority to make decisions.
I mean, usually the way we handle it is, you know, the way I would view it is we would give the executive secretary that leeway, and the commission would just review those. And if we felt uncomfortable, or maybe we could have a mechanism, and I hate to kind of give up finality, but maybe have a mechanism to kind of say, that's not
That's
really
pretty
how we
much
would
what-
do it.
that's-
I don't know,
that's-
I mean, I don't think that would
No,
happen.
but maybe, and so maybe what you're saying is that the complaint comes to me, I make a decision, and it comes to the
Just for
commission for
review.
approval.
Yeah, or something like that.
Pretty
So-
much that's what we do
Well, I was
now.
gonna say, I feel like that's just kind of what's right now.
Well, I mean, but so
But we
what,
can formalize that in the language.
but I mean, so what, I'm not really sure the nature of the problem. What I thought was the nature of the issues is, you know, we have to do that where you contact each party, and that's what I'm saying is carve out, not exceptions, but carve out mechanisms where you can make that initial decision that, hey, we don't have to do the mail to this person, that type of thing. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
The biggest, not the biggest, but one of the biggest problems that we have is just the length of time for everything. It takes forever to resolve a complaint, that's the first thing. And at that point, it's like, who even remembers what happened, you know? The other thing too is that people have figured out how to weaponize the complaint process. That if I wanna go after you, I can file complaint after complaint after complaint. And it's a form of harassment. What the problem is that it just consumes our time. And I would prefer that the boards and the commission office worry about other things like, okay, what are we doing in the community? What are they saying? How can we help them?
Yes.
What are their issues? You know, and it's always been our challenge to get the board to refocus and stop bickering, just worry about this. I mean, I've been to a number of board meetings and I stood there and I said, the only people that not the only people that are important, but I said, the main purpose of your board is not your meeting or your board members, it's the people sitting down right there, the people in the public. That's who we're here for. And I just would like to get back to focusing on that. The challenge for us has always been, when it comes to the complaint system, it does consume our time because it's so much time, and we gotta track this thing for 3, 4, 5, 6 months.
Well, that's what we should cut down.
And yeah, and
Tracking or
so
that kind of stuff.
Well, and
So-
that's,
by resolving it with just, okay, it comes to the executive secretary and the initial decision is there.
yeah,
They
and I
make
think
a
it,
decision.
it gives you a mechanism. So, like for instance, someone does repetitive complaints, even if you
It's
look
listed.
at on their face the complaint, you know, they say, okay, well that may be something, but you know that it's just continual harassment. You have the ability under some structured way of saying, okay, I deem this,
Right.
and I don't want to say without merit, but I deem this, you know, whatever, and just not appropriate for, does not need to go through the formalized grievance process for the true grievances. And like I said, you could take that, you know, just say, this is my recommendation, or this is the decision, I would think we would allow.
I would like to.
And then
you're gonna-
review, and then we review it, and then we may say, I mean, I don't think this would happen much, but, you know, maybe give the commission the ability, and that's why I said I hate to go not have finality on some of the, you know, any decision made, but maybe allow the commission to kind of claw it back and say,
Yeah.
okay, well,
Excuse me, Chair. I'm sorry, Chair.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Both Kevin and Tom have had their hands up for a while, just
Oh, thank you. I didn't see that.
Oh,
Okay, so, okay, thank you. Kevin, would you like to, add something?
Thank you, Chair. The discussion is very interesting tonight, and I appreciate the document which we did get the link to look at in real time. I think that issues that we often see in the real world, I'll use that, I guess, loosely with the neighborhood boards. You know, those of us who may have taken time to read the now current neighborhood plan, and when something happens that doesn't sit right, that's what a complaint may be filed, not for a personal reason. So I'll set those types of things aside, at least for now. But if you would like to give things back to the board to try to adjudicate whatever the issue was, you're in this vicious circular loop because it happened because, and a lot of times, a lack of training or lack of understanding or a lack of wanting to learn about how to run a meeting dispassionately. It should be essentially emotionless when you're doing the mechanics of a meeting. But when those points are missed and something is flawed and members may try to correct or prevent the same thing from happening again, if that's not responded to, then that's when complaints may get filed. So I hope that there will be some way to make sure that there's improved training, number one. Number two, that if things still continue to go sideways, you know, will there still be the assumption that anything in the neighborhood plan as revised will be something that people will be held responsible for? That's what I hope we can maintain at this point. But thanks for the discussion.
Thank you. Tom, did you have your hand up?
Okay, thanks. Yes, thanks very much, Patrick. I'll be brief because I really appreciate the range of the discussion. And I think there's some really some new ideas here and willingness to throw some experimentation out there. As we have talked at prior meetings, you know, the start of all of this overhaul and everything else was based on problems with the complaint process. Here we are 27, 28 years later, coming back to it. But what I particularly appreciate this evening with the start, and again, thanks as well for getting the document up so that I could print it out here in the office. And the key to me is this. The consideration of how to place some responsibility directly at the board, and let me abuse the term, in the community, and to make it far more timely. And that is, if there is a complaint, I'm trying to find other terminology like concerns, you know, or something else. Then the key is this idea to place some responsibility directly with the board first. You know, wait, time out, folks. Have you discussed it at your level first before perhaps you bring it to the executive secretary and or the neighborhood commission? I think is a critical element that, quite frankly, we never considered. We never thought to go in this direction over these many years, whatever. We've got a lot of experience. And I think the other limitation that everybody is, I'd be so bold as to say this, everybody has been very uncomfortable with is, okay, so I file a complaint, so I get a hearing, so the neighborhood commission actually considers doing something, and in most cases then actually does not come out with anything that most folks view as meaningful or whatever. Even a letter of censure, you know, is a rare thing. So I think to turn this upside down, if you will, and place the majority of the responsibility first and foremost at the board level, the central question being, have you as the members of that board considered the concerns, and do you have anything to say or recommendations to make to the executive secretary or the commission, I think can be a far more meaningful element of the review of the board's conduct or public members' conduct or whatever in that particular community, because that diversity is certainly there. But, I think the start here philosophically and stuff is a very useful and important direction to at the very least add to some of the framework that is already in the complaint process, because I think there really is a critical role for the executive secretary, and of course the buck stops with the commission. But I think more of a distinction of everything that happens before the opportunity for a quote unquote contested case hearing, which is at the end of chapter 91 of the plan, but also in chapter 91 of Hawaii revised statutes. The idea here to try to deal with all this stuff right up front fast in the board or at the board level, I think is really an excellent idea that bears far more consideration in the short term here as a possible expansion of that idea in the complaint portion here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, can I follow up?
Yeah,
No,
Oh,
sorry,
yeah,
go
sorry,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, because we didn't even get that far into here. I know that Dylan was just introducing before we jumped into discussion. But as we see on the second page, there is what Tom just mentioned, which is the process would start with the board. They would have that conversation, and
When
then
you
produce a.
Can you, if it's particularly in here, can you give us a
Yes.
site? Yeah, direct us, thank you.
So, it actually starts on the bottom of page 1. So 3-2-102, complaints
Okay.
initiated by a board member. So letter A
Okay, thank you.
explains that the board member files the complaint, and then it goes to the board. It gets on their agenda. They have a conversation. That's where every board member has the opportunity to say how they feel about the topic. The majority of that board would speak. They would have a vote and say, "What's our recommendation?" What they do in that meeting is not final. They don't take the action. They propose it back to the commission, which could streamline the process. And now you've heard from every board member versus how does it work right now? You only hear from the interested parties, the complainant and the respondent, and maybe if it went to a hearing, you would then hear from their witnesses, a select few that they choose. So having this from the whole board, who then get to decide, if I was someone that filed a complaint and my board is 15 people, and I only had 2 people on my side, I would see that as significant. And then that could maybe resolve future issues, because in this year, we've seen 30 complaints and a lot of them are similar. So just want to note that that's kind of laid out here. We could take some time to review, but the idea is to just, I think Tom
Let me-
mentioned something.
Yeah, let me follow up real quick. Go ahead.
Okay, I like what Tom said, also what you just brought up, but there's one word that's missing out of here with the board, chairman. So when somebody does bring up a concern,
Mhm.
and I like that, it goes concern and it could transition into a complaint.
Mhm.
The concern is at the board level. That should go right to the chair. The chair gets that flag and has to take action on it with the board. Says, hey, we got this issue. I apologize, I left that off the agenda. We can't talk about it right now. We can't make a decision, the chair. But if that individual, if they feel that the chair has not answered the concern, then that could transition that level into a complaint because they feel they've been wrong, because maybe the chair says, enough, we're just gonna move on ahead. I think that should be, I think you're on the right track, but I do like when you can take stuff at the lowest level, and I really think more has to go on to the chairs. The chairs need more training, they need to have that leadership, and they need to identify when there's issues, that there's multiple complaints coming up, why? And they gotta nip it in the bud early, because if you got a non-team player in there, it's time to weed them out early. Don't let this thing fester 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and then bring them in. You guys are the experts, so we come in, we sit down with you in here, you talk. The chair, the person that feels that they've been wronged, and you talk about it, and if they still feel they're wrong, issue the complaint, come to the commission. And then they come again.
I like what Larry's saying. It's a little more straightforward process, a little bit more stepwise process. Another comment I have, just looking at this, what Dylan has up on the screen. I was under the impression, Lloyd, and maybe I'm wrong, but I remember you telling me that the NCO had no authority over committees.
I don't know if authority is the right, yeah, I would think so, because we don't cover them, we don't support them. we will help in maybe finding a location, but we don't do the minutes for them, we don't record them. You know, the committees are,
Fact finding.
yeah, it's a meeting that we
They're-
don't.
They're supposed to do all the
currently in
things
the
the
plan.
sunshine law requires, and we don't do that.
Because it
I-
gets a
I-
little
the
sticky
committees
if you
don't
guys.
file Minutes, for
So
example.
this is the challenge, I mean, and you're right, because they don't always follow sunshine law.
They don't.
And we have committees that have meetings and they have minutes and, they never get their minutes done. And it's to the point where it's like 100 minutes. The problem is this, for us, the challenge is this. There are 33 boards and they probably average about 3 committees per board. That's 99 committees. Now, we got 33 meetings a month plus 99 more meetings, you know. It is physically impossible for us to. The other thing too is the committees traditionally are a sounding ground where you take an issue and you just hash it out. If you want an argument, there, have it at the committee. And so they tend to be a little bit looser in terms of following, you know, who's speaking and the process and Robert's rules and all that. Can they tighten up? Of course, but, you know,
Well,
for
no,
us to
I
be-
get it. You don't have the manpower to do that, but what my concern is that I've never had a problem with any of our committees. Let me lay that out first of all. You know, I agree with you. I think people see the committees as the place to hash things out and, you know, pound their fist on the table, and it's a much more relaxed atmosphere than a neighborhood board meeting is. But if we were to get a complaint against, say, my cesspool committee, I don't have any, I keep excellent minutes, I submit them, we vote on them, we do everything according to Hoyle, but we don't videotape it. And one of the things, at least we have with the boards, are the videotaping, so if you do have a complaint, you have a record to go back to. So it makes me a little nervous that you're including the committees here without any real support. So just my 2 cents, thank you.
Yeah, Kathleen, I just want to add that I know that you can't see the documents side by side, but that language for that in particular is in the current plan.
Oh, no, I know, and I printed out both. I've got both here
Yeah.
in front of me.
So that's something
So-
that's something you may want to look at, like
Yeah.
even in the rest of the process about modifying that.
Okay, thank you
Yeah,
very much.
we didn't have video evidence 5+ years ago, so,
Yeah,
you know.
I know it
lack
was a
of-
lot uglier 5 years ago.
no, it was beautiful, man.
Yeah, Kevin's got his hand up.
Okay,
So I take it, Lloyd, that the minutes from committees, you remember the complaint we received from,
Yeah.
George Lapuenco? I mean, he detailed all of the committees that he saw that, you know, didn't post agendas, didn't, submit minutes, and I don't think that, has that changed at all since that complaint?
It's improved.
It's improved.
Yeah.
It's
Is it?
improved,
But
yeah.
it's still, you still got a lot that don't.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, I don't think it's gonna change because, again, the nature of the boards are all volunteers, and if you expect them to submit minutes as the commission does in support of the board, good luck. It's not gonna happen.
so, Kevin?
Thank you, Chair. If I could just jump back to what Dylan W. had said earlier about 3-2-102 on the proposal that was distributed tonight, Part A. The idea of if there's an issue or that becomes a complaint being discussed by the board, at some point, it sounds like you're going to go around the room and poll each of the board members to see what they think about it. My initial thought is, so what? They are a bunch of unqualified opinions, and we're missing out on having some threshold or baseline of an understanding of what the neighborhood plan is and means and represents and how it should be followed. I mean, you would get so many different, you likely could get so many different opinions that would come out of that roundtable discussion that would lead to so many sidebars, and it wouldn't matter because who there is going to be the authority to know, well, neighborhood plan says we do this in light of this, and that's why this was an error. It'd be great if it was that easy, but I feel like we're just opening up this huge Pandora's box. Thank you, Chair.
And if I can just respond to
Go
that
ahead,
really quickly, it's like, Kevin, I totally hear what you're saying on that aspect. On the other hand, we just haven't been able to find a balance, because that's sort of how we feel right now, where someone can just use a blanket part of the plan, like order and decorum, just because maybe someone said something that they didn't like, and that kicks off an entire process of $10 certified mails and 45 days for this person to file the complaint, 45 days for this person to respond, all of that for, you know, something that may not even, you know, up to the commission to determine, but, you know, it's once again, it goes kind of back to like the balancing scales. But I hear what you're saying too, though, you know.
Chair, if I may, is that something that would be ripe for a carve out then? If that's a specific example of a big problem?
You know, my view is, I mentioned earlier that I think, you know, there should be an initial review of the type of complaint, and if it's something that, I even think if the executive secretary believes it's something that should go back to the board, the neighborhood board, then so be it. They send it back, and if it's not, it goes to the commission directly, that type of thing.
Well, something that we should probably consider, like regarding this anyway, is just as a pain point for us to identify for the commission to consider, is in including the executive secretary. One of the issues that we've seen happen is a person files a complaint, and then in the current plan it says the executive secretary shall have 10 days to review and then consider potentially dismissing. So on a timeline perspective, if the person files the complaint and then the executive secretary has 10 days to make a determination if they believe that it was filed frivolously. So that's an additional potentially 10 days. And then if it goes to the commission maybe at the end of the month, and this is all just theoretically based on when it happens, it could be another, say, 15 days till it gets to the commission after the executive secretary has determined, at least in his initial review. So that's 25 days. And then it could come to the commission and you guys go, oh, actually, no, we disagree with you. This is something worth taking up. So at that point, we've tacked on 25 days to a respondent who doesn't even know that a complaint may have even been filed yet. And then now, so that's nearly a month. And then now they get 45 days to respond to that complaint.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can always include language like if the executive secretary were to make a decision, like say something is, I don't want to say frivolous, but does not merit a procedure or a forwarding in the complaint, the formal complaint procedure. You know, you just include language back to the filer and say, you know, any decision made by the secretary is pending approval by the commission.
Or you can say
And
it's
you
final.
don't need to go back. Well, you could, and I'm not saying
You can make
necessarily.
those decisions, just say it's final, it doesn't have to go to the commission.
But
You can trust Lloyd
hypothetically,
with the easy
Well,
ones. No,
well, but that's the
Let's-
problem. What's an
Right.
easy one? What's the first
Well,
one?
then leave it to us.
But that's what I'm saying, that
Well, the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is something that should
Anything
be
that's
addressed in
personal.
some capacity.
Yeah.
That we're dealing with right now.
Okay, well, it's something to consider dealing.
Meritorious means that there's a violation of the plan. So you make that determination, there's no violation of the plan, you see it is final. I mean, you can also recommend movement to the commission, but to dispense with those kinds of complaints that, you know, really have no merit, we don't have to see them.
In previous
It cuts off all
conversations.
that time that, you have.
So just wanted to note that in previous conversations, I mean, this is the neighborhood planning committee. The idea with the restructuring was board focused, and the boards are community based. These meetings shouldn't be very complex. In a perfect world, you have your agenda, you have your residents that come out, you have your fire and police.
Yeah.
Any interested parties that have asked to be on the agenda come to talk about projects, developments, issues, concerns, whatever it may be. And then you just have that conversation, but the bottom line for the board meetings is for the community to have their voice, right?
Right.
So now we're talking about the complaint process. And while we know that there has to be some form of that, I think we're just thinking, what is so significant that would happen at the meeting that is neighborhood commission authority So I'm not talking about an assault, you know, if that were to happen, that has nothing to do with this party right here. So that's where my mind is at when we talk about the complaint process, and that's why when we drafted this, it came from a simple perspective. We can be more efficient with the timing. As I think Tom mentioned, this has been going on for a while. They've talked about the complaint process for 20-something years. So it could be nice to see a change, and maybe, I know to Richard's point, you don't want to see the board meetings devolve into just complaints. Now they're having, right? Their 2-hour meetings turn into 3-hour meetings.
Can you
because an
imagine,
hour-
for example,
Yeah.
the complaints we've had from the same board,
Mhm.
having the board have to deal with that? So, you know, at every meeting, they're gonna have complaints to deal with, so,
But if
You
the
know,
board, if the majority of them felt a certain way and they recommended an action, you now as the commission just heard from the majority of the board and they said, we'd like this to change. Can you help us with this? Just like if they have vacancies they can't fill, if we need to temporarily help them out so they can achieve quorum, that's where the commission can help out. So I think even if it's bad for temporarily at the meetings, it could change. Some things have to get worse before they get better. So
Yeah,
these are my own thoughts, by the way. That's all. I have to
that's
say.
the disclaimer, you know, but I've always felt that the board should try and handle as much as possible, and I understand Kevin's thoughts on, you're talking about having a discussion with people that are unqualified. Well, they are qualified, they're absolutely qualified, because the only qualification is they're 18 and they live in the district.
that's right.
You know, we don't have a list of other things that we say you have to have this, or you have to have done this, so. And I also understand, and I tell this to everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people I talk to, I says, I understand the neighborhood board system and the community is not a straight line. It is, trust me, I know, it is messy. I mean, people still look at me and say, why are you doing this? And it's because I like the community. It is messy. I understand that. Doesn't mean it's wrong. Can it be improved? Sure. It's a constant thing. But at the same time, that's your community. It's messy because your community is that way. It has everybody they have all kinds of people in your community, and they all have a certain amount of rights. You have a right to come to your board meeting and say, I don't like this, or I'd like this fixed, or I want this done. Do they know process? No. Do they know procedures? No.
That's why the beauty of it is the example of that, what you're talking about is, for example, what they're going through with the other one, the big bridge. I mean, that's something they're chewing all over the place, being both sides of
Yeah.
the issue on that. And that's exactly what they
That
should be
is-
doing. They shouldn't have to be dealing with complaints, I don't like this guy or that guy, or, you know, that board member because, you know,
And
they're rude and discourteous and all of that. I mean, that's what the boards are for, to air out those kinds of community-wide issues, not personal vendetta against individuals.
right, and that was part of my thoughts on the boards handling it, because, hey, if you handle it, you spend your time. And then hopefully at some point you'll say, you know what, we don't wanna spend our
Yeah,
time
what are you
arguing with
doing?
this,
Yeah.
you know? And it's because it's easy to file a complaint if you don't have to deal with it. If somebody else is gonna do the hard work on it, then fine, file it, fill out the form and send it in. But I want the boards to figure out that their purpose is not to handle complaints or talk about it, but to talk about the bridge, to talk about other things. Radio,
Yeah,
Go ahead.
and Larry has a good point, I mean, throughout all of this discussion, is that, you know, a lot of that kind of complaints we see that have, to me, no merit, you know, it's just personal, that it's the boards, you know, they should be, or the individual members or the chair, like you said, you know, they have a lot to do with that too, so.
The chair runs that
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah, so if they can deal with that, and, you know, they're a big part of avoiding those kinds of complaints, so, yeah, the more we can do to assist the chairs, I think, go a long way.
plus it's not only the chair, but the chair is the one that makes the call a lot of times, but they really need the support of the board members.
Yeah.
They need to stand up and say, I agree with the chair, just cut this
Yeah,
discussion,
exactly.
move on, whatever it is.
The whole board, I mean, if you
Yeah.
can support that kind of thing, with the chair.
And
But when the community sees that infighting that's going on,
Well-
take a non-cohesive board,
right,
you've seen it in some of the boards,
They
the
don't wanna
community
come
actually
by.
stands up. why am I hearing this? We're supposed to be talking about this.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing as hell.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, now that
So,
we did that.
Where do we want to go? I mean, I think this has probably given us a lot to consider and to kind of think about, because everybody has seen this at the same time, except for the people who drafted it. So it's not as if the other committee members have had a chance to really review this. So Lloyd, you're looking like you.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
but,
please.
I said, and then that's what this meeting is, let's get a general idea of what we ought to do. And I think for us, I think it would work. Board gets the first shot at a complaint, makes a recommendation or a decision to the executive secretary, and the executive secretary makes a decision. And then maybe if you want, you can have that decision be presented here for final.
Yeah, and please add that verbiage in there for responsibility. It's the chair's responsibility to corral those concerns as a board, because it shouldn't be the board members doing it. It's the chair that does it.
What do you mean, what do you mean corral though?
In other words, if there are multiple board concerns and stuff like that, the chair should be corralling that with them, bringing it up for discussion, trying to fix it at their level. If they can't fix it, they come call you because the chair needs advice.
Well, I would like the board to.
Then it transitions from concern to complaint. But I really think you gotta put something in here for verbiage for the chair,
Okay,
for responsibility.
And all the areas where it takes a long time, cut the time. And if you have to recommend decision is final at some point, you know.
well, I think the point is if we can get, if I'm going to be the final say, at least the initial one, then when I get it, then, or the executive secretary gets it, maybe they got 10 days to render a decision and then it's done.
Or
Then it
put in
comes
language that won't, put that much of a burden on you, something, if 10 days is too long or too short, then put something in reasonable time, or, that kind of language
Yeah,
that might
or,
be
yeah,
helpful.
like, we can be flexible.
Yeah.
I would like
But
I
no
would like-
longer than, 50 days or something.
but I would like the executive secretary position to take action based on what that board says. When that board is done with, and it could be, we can't come to a decision. It could be, we're like, yeah, but forward that to the executive secretary.
So any delay would be on the part of the board, they don't put it on their agenda
Yeah.
right away.
And they may end up with a, split and we can't decide. We think,
Well, if they're split, you still have to make a decision.
yeah, but the point is that it's in their court and they gotta move it to the executive secretary.
So if they don't, then it's dead.
Well, it's like the commission can always, I think should always have the ability to pursue whatever.
Or if it's the first level and they say, we don't wanna move it forward any further, then it's dead. Complaint.
Yeah, because let's just say the board itself cannot decide.
I don't know that that's practical.
Yeah.
Because I think there, I don't know.
The discussion would be a waste of time if they
Okay.
have no, decision-making ability, if they were to hear a complaint.
Well, from what I've heard, we've heard a lot of ideas, had a lot of discussion. I don't know, I think at this point, it probably might behoove everybody just to sort of chew on this, so to speak. And really consider, think about what the other members of the committee and the public have said and maybe think about how to go forward. I expect we can talk a little bit outside the meeting of taking what we've heard today and incorporating some of those into a new proposal. So everybody can see what we have now versus what the current status, the current language is.
Yeah, and this isn't meant to be any kind of final draft or anything, it's just something tonight just to get an idea of what we're looking at.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so I would suggest everybody to, just kind of take a look and think about it. And then we can kind of go through the process at our next meeting of actually trying to put something on paper and go forward in that respect.
Sounds good.
Does anyone want to make any I don't want to say last comment, but any more comments? Tom,
Sure,
please
there's
go
a
ahead.
couple.
Greg.
I'm sorry, did you call me?
Yeah, Tom, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just two real quick comments. The first is we are all very familiar when chairs or members basically push off on various comments, and that is, hey, if you didn't like it or whatever, complain or go to the commission, right? It's you don't have to deal with me. You take it elsewhere. So I think one of the great virtues of the idea now is if you specifically make first line of consideration the board itself, then you're not able to do that push off. Second comment is this, that I think as there were some earlier comments about the lead in on the draft here, 3-2-101 and subsection A, whatever. The key here, I think, is a difficulty is I think there needs to be a single point of input, if you will, and then a quick review by the NCO and a delegation to the respective party. Meaning by that, in initial review or intake and initial review by the NCO, and then an assignment based on that quick review to either the board or to the executive secretary or to the neighborhood commission, depending on the nature of the circumstances. Because I think the difficulty with subsection A there is how do you best make a complaint, if you will, or express a concern to the board and make sure that it gets on the agenda or wherever it is in the timetable. So I think having a single entry point, but a review and delegation as appropriate, I think that's one appropriate add to the startup of this thing. Let me stop there because I think there have been some great ideas for us to chew on, as you suggest, Chair, and we can all come back with various proposals and stuff by February 17, I think it is. Thank you.
Do we have any other comments from anybody online?
So, yes, Chair, this is Greg.
Greg, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, and sorry, earlier I was just letting you know if you didn't see that Tom and I were there. So thank you for that. Let me stop my video so you can see me and lower my hand. Okay, so first, I'll be brief. I came in late. I apologize. I took a break to go to the beach and I was busy writing legislation today, and we had a legislative priorities meeting for quite a large group of community organizations that we were hosting for Kukua Council. And one thing I would say is there's got to be a better way to do something informal. We're all adults. We should all be adults in the room. And we go to these boards to serve for the public. We don't go for ourselves. It's not a moment that, you know, it's Greg's time to sit and raise flags and do what we do. We do it for the public, do it for the public's input, and we do it for what's best for the communities that we represent. So I personally have tried to address issues with my chair, with the executive office, with the NCO, to no avail. Unfortunately, I've had to file some complaints. I'm not going to go into that except to say the complaints I filed, it's like a black hole. I never hear back. Except for today, ironically, something came in the mail, but very rarely do I see something. So I think an informal process, a way we can raise a concern, bring the parties to the table, just like we're here in a Zoom, bring the two parties to a Zoom meeting with Lloyd, and even if the commissioners want to participate, or whatever the procedure is, have an informal chat, try to work it out like adults in the room, and if you can resolve it there, you're done. And I believe if we do act like adults, we should be able to resolve it there. Bringing it to the board for any kind of decision or review is the last thing you want to do, because the board is there to serve the public's best interest and discuss issues regarding, you know, what's best for the community, the development projects, or what have you, the street closures, street signs, this and that. So that's the last thing you want to do. And I think ultimately, if you had just followed procedural, we wouldn't have so many complaints. When you don't address complaints, they get worse. issues get worse and worse and worse. People become targets, and there's abuse. And sometimes by a chair, there's abuse of power. I don't want to go to that, but that's a fact. So that's my suggestion, informal procedure. Come to the table, just having a meeting here, talk it out, have a mediator, you know, like the executive secretary. If you actually needed to bring in a third-party mediator, maybe it could be one of the NCO commissioners that is assigned as one of the mediators. That would be great. Just like, you know, people go to mediation for other things. And I'll close there, but I think that's the solution. Else, honestly, to bring it to the board is going to just make the public look less and less. It's going to make the public look at the boards less and less as a place they want to go to discuss issues. Because I wouldn't want to go seeing complaints or other issues on the board's agenda. So that's my 2 cents for the night. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other suggestions from anybody online? Seeing none, does anyone want to add anything here? Okay, so what we will do is we will just consider, I don't think we had anything else on the agenda, did we?
No. That's it.
We will just consider all that we've discussed tonight. I think there are a lot of great suggestions and insights, and next meeting, which is February 17th.
Yeah, we need to talk about that.
Oh, okay, well,
Holiday.
okay, well, we'll talk about that in a moment. So what we'll do is, at whatever the next meeting is, and we'll talk about that in a second, is then we can maybe start trying to get into the nuts and bolts. This is obviously a very challenging subject, but it is a really important subject, and I hope we can come together and come up with a valid proposal. Anyway, so with that said, I guess we can just talk about when our next meeting is. And so what's the holiday?
We could do President's Day. It's
Oh
on the
my
17th.
goodness.
So what we could do is, what we did this meeting is move it a week forward. If
To the
everyone's
10th.
okay with Monday the 10th.
Is everybody, does anyone have a problem with Monday the 10th?
Well, we just say tentatively.
Yeah, we can say tentatively, but,
It's not official till an agenda though.
well,
But he's polling right
We
now.
just gotta
but
put Melendez.
if anybody has an issue, please let me know. If most people are available, then we'll probably pick that day, just because that probably is the best day for us to do
The
it.
17th is Monday, but Tuesday was the 18th. That's, I think, maybe what you're.
I think we had challenges with Tuesdays.
I know that Commissioner Melendez has his Milani meeting that day.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I
And
think,
actually Melendez would have had that Monday before for the survey.
oh, okay. Oh, was he planning on the
I
survey?
think so.
Well, we have his survey.
But we just move him up.
next week.
Yeah, we just move on to the next meeting.
We're just
Well, I don't think we talked about
Okay,
his next
let's not
meeting.
live
because
with-
he
well,
hasn't had
No,
his
but
meeting this month.
that's the way that we're starting to get into this pattern.
Okay, so,
His meeting is before his.
oh,
And the
okay.
only reason why Melendez got his Thursday is because he couldn't fit it in this month for that Monday before.
Well,
Anytime
I'll
you do
email.
outside of Monday, then we have conflicts.
Yeah, so I'll email Steven and then we can go, but let's tentatively say the 10th. I mean, if it's not, hopefully it is, because
March?
it's hard to, well, I don't want to put this off too far, but anyway, so we're tentatively say the 10th. And please just be aware that, that date is tentative at this point. Okay? Anything further?
The last thing, we're just putting it on all agendas is the neighborhood board elections, so naturally I added to yours. It seems that everyone online and in here is already well invested in the process, so.
So make sure
Registration's
you
open
register.
until February 21st.
And I'm
Okay, thank you.
recruiting.
Thank you.
Thank you. All
That's
right, I'll call the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
But it's good you're posting all of it.